Hello and welcome to the Week 12 mini bonus episode of the Power Grid, where we're going to be covering just the 3 Thanksgiving Day games. We're going to jump right into it because we're going to keep this one short and sweet. Devin, tell me, which quarterbacks do you like on this 3-game slate?
Yeah, I think someone will mention the most expensive guy on this, or one of the more expensive guys. So I'm gonna go cheap. So there's a lot of different ways to play this slate, and but the way that I'm playing it is on draft, especially on DraftKings. Case Keenum is just simply too cheap. So he's averaging 291 yards over his last 3 games. Detroit has a reputation that they're extremely strong against the pass, but they're actually in the middle of the road. So they're allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this season. Adam Thielen, and we'll get to wide receivers in a little bit, but Adam Thielen and Keenum are my favorite stack this week because those two are just locked in together. And Thielen, who's known as more of a possession guy, is actually averaging 20 yards per catch over his last 3 games. So that is my favorite stack. I'll be using it in both cash and GPPs. And so I think it opens up so many opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, and Diggs is likely to see a lot of Darius Slay in that matchup, so I like that Thielen call there. Jeff, who do you like at quarterback?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with Rivers. I think Rivers is probably the best play for me this week, and I'm going to be pivoting away from Melvin Gordon because if you can do that in a lot of your lineups, and I'm going to be playing more GPPs that way, I just think he's going to be way over-owned, and I think that there are cheaper running backs, and you can go with the Keenan Allen, which is going to be very popular, and stack him with Rivers.
Yeah, I think Rivers in that sort of pick'em game. Vegas has those 2 teams even right now, 48-point total, the highest of the 3 games on Thursday. So I think that's going to be a popular pick. Ryan, who's your quarterback of the week?
At the risk of just going with the low-hanging fruit, Kirk Cousins. I mean, we have a Washington team who's favored in a high total game. They have very little running game to speak of, and they lost Chris Thompson for the year, which actually kind of hurts Cousins, I guess, more than the running game per se. But it's a team. It's almost like what we've seen with Russell Wilson lately, where we have a no running game at all and a good passing game, and so kind of all roads lead to the quarterback. So Cousins is a guy that's going to drive the engine. So he's somebody that I really like in that slate.
Devin flashed up the red black-eyed Joe. What were you responding to there, Devin?
That Chris Thompson hurts Kirk Cousins. So we can just jump right into running backs if no one, because there's a running back for Washington who I think is going to replace Chris Thompson. It's Byron Marshall. So this is a guy who caught 74 passes at Oregon his junior season. Just an electric running back who we've seen that skill set, and that type of player can typically come out of nowhere. So we've seen Tariq Cohen do it in bits and pieces. Alvin Kamara has done it. So as long as you have speed and the ability to catch the ball, it seems like those types of running backs come out of nowhere that they're not on the radar. Marshall's that type of guy. So I look at it a couple years ago when Shane Vereen won basically every contest on Thanksgiving. Marshall could be that guy this year where if you don't have him, you're just not going to win.
Yeah, I think that's a sneaky play. He should be lower owned, so I think he's a good GPP play. John, we haven't heard from you yet. Tell us about a running back you like.
Well, I mean, I think the decision everybody's going to have to make this week is whether to roster Melvin Gordon or not. On a 3-game slate, he is the only elite running back. He's the only expensive running back. And you're going to have to make a decision whether or not you want to roster him. And, I mean, it's a good matchup against Dallas. I mean, Dallas DVOA is 26th versus the rush. I think that's the dead last DVOA rush defense on the entire 3-game slate. And Melvin Gordon, we know, sees a lot of action. The question is if he's what do we think he's going to be? 70% owned? Is that accurate? Do you guys think that's fair?
At least 60, I would say. Yeah,
really
just
high.
because he is that elite guy.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to fade him. But from a game strategy perspective, I almost feel like you probably should fade him and hope that Phillip Rivers, somebody's already said it.
Jeff did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, if Phillip Rivers throws a pair of touchdowns to Keenan Allen again this week against Orlando Scandrick, which isn't out of the question because Scandrick has pretty much stunk in the second half of the season. If that were to happen, 70% of the rosters plummets, and the 30% who have something else are now viable. And for me, I don't know how you guys play these 3-game slates, but I really don't play a whole lot of quote cash games. I'm more so a GPP player because I think that's the way you've got to go on a 3-game slate. And so for that reason, I think that you've got to kind of go under. And imagine Devin not liking me saying something about negative about cash games.
Well, here's the thing. For cash games, most 3-game slates, I'll agree with you. The problem is on Thanksgiving, everyone and their mother, grandmother, brother-in-law, everyone's playing. Like, this is the biggest 3-game slate of the year. You have a ton of people who have no idea what they're doing. So for that reason, they're going to make some pretty dumb decisions. So that's the reason I do play cash games on Thanksgiving.
I'm not going to argue with that. I think that's a fair counter argument. I bring this up because I think it's really important to talk about game strategy on a day like Thanksgiving. And so one thing you need to be thinking about is Melvin Gordon. Another one is who is your sleeper, and we'll be giving some sleepers you need in order to win GPPs for sure. You're going to need that guy who's less than 10% owned, who pulls through, and maybe that is Byron Marshall, as Devin's already brought up. And then the last thing, don't think that you need to spend all of your money on a week like this week, because going a little bit lower in terms of the money that you're spending actually gives you some roster uniqueness. And on a 3-game slate, it really is not necessary to spend. I mean, I think it's entirely fine to leave 10% on the table.
Yeah, that's a great point. And ordinarily, I don't play cash games with fewer than 5 games on the slate, just because I feel like the more decisions I have to make, the more edge I have with my research. But Devin makes a great point about this being kind of a softer level of competition than usual. I think
if you find some username that you've never heard of before, join their games, because likely they're just, like that. That's where head-to-head games can come into play. It's just someone's posting a game and they have no experience badge. They're not playing like that. You can sort those people out. Don't go against the top guys. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But go against some guy. If there are players who you're just like, who is this person? Then join their games.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll find newer players throwing in like $20 head-to-head instead of like $21 head-to-heads.
Right.
If you're listening and you're a newer player, make sure you're playing like $101 head-to-heads instead of like $100 head-to-head. You can use the same lineup on all of them. It's a way better – you'll have way easier competition. Ryan, you look like you've got something to say.
Yeah, just on John's topic, my sleeper I'm leaning towards for this slate is Theo Riddick. I'm not sure he's going to be very highly owned. You've got Gordon, you've got McKinnon, you've got P. Ryan, even a guy like Byron Marshall for the sharp folks like Devin. But, I see Riddick catching a handful of passes. Fantasy points against for Minnesota is very low, but most of that is because they're really good against the rush. But they've given up numerous 3 to 5 reception games, particularly in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So Riddick's a guy that I could just see maybe 4 catches, getting in the end zone, and that's what you need for this kind of slate. Somebody that nobody's going to have and that can get you a touchdown or so.
Yeah, I think Samaje Perine is going to be really popular. You mentioned him. Chris Thompson got put on IR with a leg injury. But I do like trying to find a guy like Theo Riddick who's going to be lower owned. Jeff, I'd like to move on to wide receivers, but hit me with one running back before we go there if you got one.
Well, I think that you can be not only building on the uniqueness of fading Gordon. A lot of people would go to Eckler there, but I think that you can go to both running backs from Minnesota. I think you can. I don't think many people are going to do that and stack both McKinnon with Latavius Murray, because Detroit is averaging 4.4 yards against, and they've given up 12 rushing touchdowns. So I think that's going to be a unique way to play it. It saves you some cap space, and it kind of gets you off of the Minnesota passing game, which everybody's going to go Thielen. So stack the 2 running backs from Minnesota, maybe even couple that with the Minnesota defense, and plug in any wide receivers and tight ends you want.
On a smaller slate, I think you can afford to do that without losing a ton of upside. So that's a play that can work out.
The problem is Minnesota going to score 4 touchdowns? I mean, I don't know.
That's what you're projecting if you're doing that. You're projecting that they're going to get 4 rushing touchdowns and completely obliterate Detroit. So you got to be thinking that's the way the game's going to play out if you're going to do that.
I think it's a weekend, or excuse me, a slate for game scripting and figure how the games are going to play out and build your players based on how the games you think are going to play out versus just going for your 3x or your multipliers, because a lot of the multipliers don't look like they're going to hit this weekend.
Right. Devin, let's go to wide receivers. I want to hear about your favorite wide receiver this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned it, but my favorite guy is Adam Thielen. He's going up. He's going to avoid Darius Slay like we talked about. He's the guy that, I'm just paying up for and figuring it out, figuring the rest of my lineup out. I'm actually paying up for Melvin Gordon as well. I'll let other people try and get cute. And especially on DraftKings where there's more roster flexibility. On FanDuel, I can see fading Gordon because you only have 2 running backs. So, but with the flex and having that third option, I'll be paying up for both. But Thielen is the only guy. A lot of people are going to be on Keenan Allen because he went 12 for 159 and 2 last weekend. But do we really expect that from Keenan Allen, who's not typically a touchdown guy? And maybe someone can make the point on why we should start Keenan Allen. But Thielen's my top end guy this week.
Yeah, Ryan, who do you like at receiver?
I like Josh Doxson in Washington. He was targeted multiple times in the end zone last week. His price is still down because they didn't connect. But, the last 3 weeks, Washington has faced Seattle, Minnesota, and New Orleans, all really good pass defenses. Doxson's played 89% of the snaps and has 19 targets in those 3 games. So I think even if he gets the 6 targets he's averaging against these really tough defenses, he'll do a lot more with them than he's done recently. So, I could definitely see him scoring a touchdown this week.
Yeah, and Washington has the highest implied total of all of Thursday, so Washington should be scoring a lot of points. And I think people are still pretty hot on Crowder, as because he feels like he's been more efficient. But I could see Doxson turning that around this week. Jeff, tell me about a wide receiver you like.
Well, I think we've hit on the most of the popular guys, and we talked about Allen before. But I'll throw 2 guys out that I think are punt plays that could really turn the slate around, which is Kenny Golladay and Roger Lewis. I think both those guys. Shepard's questionable; he may not play, which means Roger Lewis, who caught a lot in I forget where he went to college, but I know he played. He was a high
Oklahoma.
Thank you.
Roger Lewis is Bowling Green. Sorry.
Thank you. He caught a ton of passes. I think he's a talented player. He's dirt cheap on DraftKings. I think that's a guy who could really pivot the slate, as could Kenny Golladay this week, who played over 60% of the snaps last week.
Funny, Sterling Shepard looks like he may not play this week. He didn't practice on Tuesday. He's still dealing with migraines. And to me, it almost looked like Tavares King might be a strong play here over Roger Lewis. I would prefer him if you're going to go with the Giants receivers. I mean, obviously, Engram is going to see the most action from that Giants passing game. Speaking of which, let's move to some tight ends.
Can I mention one more receiver real quick?
Yeah, do it.
I thought he would be mentioned, but Marvin Jones.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were burned by him a couple weeks ago against the Browns, and it's probably going to take his ownership pretty far down, and it really shouldn't. So he's going up against Trey Waynes this week and avoiding Xavier Rhodes, which is a benefit. But, I mean, Marvin Jones, if you take out that Browns game, has been phenomenal over his last 4. So he went 6 for 128 against the Steelers, 7 for 107 and 2 touchdowns against the Packers, and 4 for 85 and a touchdown against the Bears. So Marvin Jones is as good of a play this week as just about anybody. So he's a guy that I'm all over this week.
Yeah, I think Golladay is going to see the most of Xavier Rhodes in this game, so I actually like both Marvin Jones and Golden Tate. My favorite stack is Stafford, Jones, Tate, Thielen. If I'm going to stack up a game and do a big game stack, which I usually do on these smaller Thanksgiving slates, that's the 4-player stack that I'm going to go with. I don't usually recommend a triple stack, but on a small slate.
I just hope it's not Eric Ebron week again like it was last Thanksgiving.
Oh, geez. Yikes. Yeah.
I can't say it on here.
We would not be thankful for that.
Yeah. No, we will not be thankful for that. Ryan, tell me about a tight end you like.
I like Vernon Davis. And even if Jordan Reed does play, I still like Davis. I don't think Reed will, based on what our own Dr. Gene has said in his Monday injury update. Even if he does, he's going to play a bit role. I don't think he's ready. So Vernon Davis could get lower ownership on him if Reed did play. But regardless, they play the Giants, who did end their streak of touchdowns allowed to tight ends last week, but in so doing gave up 8 catches for over 100 yards to Travis Kelce. So it's still not something that they're good at. And so Davis is the tight end I like the most.
And Devin disagrees with Ryan. It wouldn't be the power grid without Devin flashing the red black-eyed Joe on a Ryan pick. Why don't you like Vernon Davis?
I think his ownership's going to be too high. I mean, this is a guy who has scored one touchdown this year. It's so if I'm looking at a fade and a guy who only has one touchdown, isn't heavily utilized in the red zone, to me, I mean, he's not that cheap. So I don't look at him as a top end guy. For me, if I'm spending up, I'm going to Evan Engram. I know the ownership is probably just as high, if not higher, than Vernon Davis, but Ingram's a guy that I trust a little bit more. Washington has been just as bad as the Giant, not quite as bad, but very poor against the tight ends this year. So that's the direction that I'm going with. I just worry that, yes, we talk about sometimes you want to avoid the top end ownership, but let's say Vernon Davis is 30 to 40%. And he only has one touchdown on the year. If he doesn't score, he's had some games where he just doesn't perform, especially on non-PPR site or half-point PPR sites like FanDuel.
Yeah. Jeff, who do you like at tight end other than Davis and Engram?
Well, there's two other ways to play this. One is to stack both those guys on DraftKings, or to go completely pivot this and go to Kyle Rudolph against Detroit. Yeah. I think Rudolph is in a good spot. Detroit is not great against the tight end either, and Rudolph will have the lowest ownership of those three. So that's probably where I would look to in GPPs, especially if you're not using Thielen.
Yeah, I think he'll be the third highest owned. I agree. His ownership will be way lower than those two.
And throw Eric Ebron in it because he loves Thanksgiving.
He's gonna eat on Thanksgiving. Ebron eats. That's just what happens.
I'm still scarred, but
is there?
I can tell.
Is there any love for old man Jason Witten with the Chargers having really strong corners on the perimeter?
He's looking so old. Like, he started off great. He's looking old.
I agree, and it is a short week, so if you don't like the old man narrative, I guess you're fading.
And Dak has been really bad recently, so that doesn't help matters.
We've mentioned no Cowboys at all.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Cowboys fans. Hey, John. Do you like any Cowboys this week, or are you just like, hey, yeah, I wouldn't have mentioned any Cowboys?
I think you've got to look at both running backs, Rod Smith and Alfred Morris. Those are the guys that I'm most interested in. The Cowboys do not want to get in the shootout with this Chargers team because they can't keep up. They're playing at home. If they play possession football, they have a chance of winning this game. I was surprised that Vegas has it as a pick 'em. It's going to be a close game if they can control the time of possession, and the best way to do that is with these running backs. Last week we saw Alfred Morris get plenty of looks. I think that until the game got out of hand, I should point out that at that point, right, then it's a Rod Smith show. But both of these guys, going back on some of that game strategy we were talking about with running backs, Alfred Morris is 4,800 on DraftKings and Rod Smith is 3,400. You can have the entire Cowboys running game for $8,200 against the Chargers, who haven't been great against the run for the overall this season. I've got them as the 22nd DVOA rush defense. So I think there are worse ways you can go than that. But I'm not going with Dez this week. The best cornerback statistically in the second half of the season has been Casey Hayward, and I think he'll have his hands full with him.
Yeah. Jeff, give us your favorite defense and your favorite kicker.
Can I mention how to play kickers real quick?
Sure. Wait, you want? Okay, yeah.
Open up your in-laws Monopoly game. Number them 1 through 6 and roll a dice.
Now, hold on. I named 3 kickers in my article last week, and they all broke 10 points. So, come on. There's definitely you can get this done. So,
all right.
I know, John, you don't listen to me anyway, but, hey, just follow my kickers and just
1 through 6. It's perfect.
Jeff, give us your alternative view. Yeah, give us a different point of view on this.
All right. Defense is going to be Washington. Your pivot is probably Detroit because they scored 7 touchdowns. And Minnesota's in play, too. Kicker, it's down to Rose and Novak. They're both 4,700 to 4,600. I don't trust Rose, so I'm probably going to use Novak for $4,600.
I like it. Thanks. Short and sweet. Good recommendations. Fellas, that's going to do it.
I like my strategy better.
The rolling the dice strategy.
Nice. And heads up challenge goes out
All right, name your price.
We'll settle this in our next show. Thanks for listening to our bonus Thanksgiving mini episode. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Please go back for seconds and listen to our Week 12 main slate episode, or chow down on our free Thanksgiving Day content at footballguys.com/DFS. We've got a little section of free content there this week. So on behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, Jeff Pasquino, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee, saying thank you for watching and thanks for being a football guy. To check out all of our DFS content over at footballguys.com, click on the icon in front of Ryan's face. To subscribe to our Football Guys TV YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click below me now.